Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Consciousness Cafe. I'm Daniel Endy, your host for this evening's event. And tonight we're going to learn about the 12 steps to spiritual awakening. This program is sponsored by the Children of Infinity, an organization started by this evening's guest, Dr. K. Narayan. Please join me in welcoming Dr. K.
Thank you, Daniel.
Dr. K and I share a lot in common. We have an interest in physics. He has a degree in physics, I believe, and careers in software, and what seems to be a lifelong passion for understanding the big questions like why we're here and looking for the answers to those big questions. So let's start with a little bit about your background, Dr. K. Tell us more about your interest in physics and how you came to spirituality.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. So it has been a journey. I would say there were two streams in my life that kind of ran for a while together. So the first one was spirituality, and that started when around 25 years ago, I decided to cultivate a daily meditation practice. This was back in India, and I didn't have much idea of what meditation is and how to do it, but I felt inspired by reading the books from different people at that time. And then that practice was one stream that has been kind of constant in my life. As I studied more, I actually decided to study physics because that's what goes into the nature of reality. And then I ended up getting a PhD in quantum mechanics, which was an integration point in my life where I could scientifically understand the nature of reality as is understood right now. Then in about 2011 is when I had a spiritual awakening. And it took about 8 years from then to do further integration. And then right before COVID, I felt inspired to start this organization. It's called Children of Infinity, to share what I had learned. And then along the way, so that was in 2020, early 2020. And right after that, I also started having different teachers show up in my life who gave me a way to connect with what I call source energy directly and transmit it through a being known as Divine Mother, who you can think of the feminine aspect of the source energy. So it's been a long journey of understanding, integration, practice, and then trying to create something that can be shared with the world.
Very nice. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your spiritual influences, some of the teachers and others that you find inspiration from?
Sure. So my earliest influence was from an enlightened being from India who was called Paramahansa Yogananda. He was the first person to popularize yoga. He wrote a book called Autobiography of a Yogi. And then after that, I also read about, so Paramahansa is like a degree, that's the ultimate degree in human consciousness. What it means is somebody who has become enlightened. And there are many of them in India.
Let's take a moment and talk about Yogananda, as he's known. And you mentioned yoga. Now, what we know as yoga are positions and breathing, but I believe the origins are a little different. Can you say a few words about that?
Sure. So the literal meaning of yoga is a union. Now, the union of what with what. So that's where we go into non-duality, which is like the theoretical aspect of spirituality. Basically, what it says is everything arises from this one energy field. And you and me and everybody, even though we seem to be separate, we are portions of that source energy. But we have forgotten that. So yoga is the process of reuniting or realizing that we are one with that source energy. So that's the true meaning of yoga.
Yes, thank you for going through that. A lot of folks think that it's just, putting on some tight clothes and doing some exercise. Anyway, do you know anything about, this is a random aside, do you know anything about Kriya Yoga?
Yes. So the goal of all forms of yoga, there are different ways yoga works. And then it was highly advanced in the sense that it was customized to how people are. So some people are very emotional, and then for them, there's a path of devotion. Some people are highly analytical. For them, there's a path of knowledge. Some people are very kind of methodical with energies, and then there is a Raja Yoga for them. So these are different ways how we are wired. And for however you are wired, there was supposed to be a way where you could practice yoga in your own way and make your own effort towards enlightenment.
Very good, very good. So you were talking about Paramahansa and then some other teachers. Who else?
Yes. So other teachers around that time, there was another being called Muktananda Paramhansa. He started something known as Siddha Yoga worldwide. So he comes from a different branch where there's a direct transmission of energy for Kundalini awakening. And so he was just one of them who started this, but there are many, many teachers after that who have come with this background of awakening Kundalini, which is an inner energy. Once that's awakened, it takes you to higher consciousness.
And how about some of your Western influences?
Yes. So my Western influences, mostly they came from the research that has undergone in the past 50 years, starting with past life regression, research into reincarnation by Stevenson and Tucker, and then pre-birth planning, Robert Schwartz, and there are others, and then channeled information, which there are lots of people. Bashar, I really like. I also like the raw material.
I like both of them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in the 80s when I was still searching and hadn't found much, I'd been on this path since I was a teenager in the 70s. And I found one of the first things I found was Seth Speaks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've investigated Seth, and then Carlos Castaneda, who speaks about shamanism. And then there was not much for quite a while. Then I found the raw material was one of the pieces I found in the 80s that which like, oh, this is interesting. And then a number of others, and Bashar was a real key influence for me. How about you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was definitely a key influence in the sense he integrated all these different pieces in a way that makes logical sense.
Yeah, I think we're both similar that way. That I have an engineering degree. You have your quantum mechanics physics degree. We're strongly left-brained.
Mm-hmm.
I think he appeals to those folks. Prior to that, I found Abraham and the Law of Attraction in that material, and I read it, and I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, this seems kind of circular logic. I'm not sure, but Bashar really tied it together and opened the door for me. In particular, I like his teaching. It's not this or that, it's this and that.
And that.
Which is integration, right? It's oneness, it's unity. Speaking of oneness and unity, and because you have a background in Indian philosophy and teachings, what can you tell us about, I believe I am pronouncing this correctly, Advaita?
Advaita, yes. So I think that was the greatest contribution from philosophy at that time. And Advaita means not two. So things that appear to be separate are not really separate. They come from the same source. An example of that is just thinking about electricity. The same electricity goes in a bulb and becomes light, and it goes in a fan and it becomes motion. And in a speaker, it becomes sound, yet it's the same electricity. So this idea that everything arises from one source or non-duality, that was the basis of Advaita at that time.
Very good. So tell us a little bit about the Children of Infinity. I found you originally, when you launched that, somehow it hit my radar, and signed up and you were holding regular groups and encouraging people to start local groups. Or tell us a little bit about the founding.
Sure. So I started this, it's a funny story. Right before COVID is I looked into a profile of a Facebook friend who I haven't seen in like 20 years. And he moved to Germany and he started a free kind of yoga community without any sign up, without anything. You just show up and you do yoga, and that's pretty much it. So I felt so inspired that I thought, why not start something? And then right after I started, COVID hit, and that's when the organization has had a chance to reach a big audience. But the point is, I want to, just like we have a foundation of science where there are some basic things that we all know. So for example, if you want to do physics, you know about Newton's laws of motion. You understand how basically forces work and how objects move and things like that. So I wanted to just create a basic background about spirituality, about what it means, what are the core practices, and build a community around that. So that's when I started a nonprofit. And what we do is we have twice a month, we have different lectures. And ultimately, the goal of spirituality is not to kind of transcend physicality. The point is to integrate physicality because it's an aspect of divinity. And what that means is true spirituality helps us in all walks of life. It helps us in having better relationships, better health, more abundance, more joy, and everything. So there is a lot to how to apply the theoretical concepts into real life. So those are the things that I touch upon, and I do my own research from different fields, including psychology and philosophy, and I try to integrate and make it in a way that people can apply it in their lives.
Very good. And you do a wonderful job. You've also produced a fair number of videos.
Yes.
Approximately a dozen or so.
Yes. So what we do is after every lecture, we create a video that's available on YouTube where people can watch it and get the information again.
Yeah, and I recommend those videos pretty highly. They're wonderful overviews of various spiritual principles and teachings. I put the Children of Infinity link in the chat, and we'll put your YouTube link in the chat as we proceed. Mark or Jim put a question, and please, if anybody has a question, feel free to put it in the chat. And later on, we'll specifically move to that and doing Q&A. But Jim said, some people may not know who Bashar is. Do you want to tell them or should I?
You can go ahead, that's fine.
Bashar is a channeled entity, channeled by Daryl Anka, who is actually related to, I think is it Paul Anka, the singer? Daryl lives in LA and works in the film industry besides doing his channeling work. And somewhere back in the 70s, I think he saw a UFO and it woke him up and knocked him out of his normal Earth life trajectory. And he began learning more things. And then in a class, a spiritual class he was in, he got hit by this feeling of, I'm supposed to channel this person named, this being named Bashar. And Bashar is, purports to be an extraterrestrial who is assigned to Earth as a, what is he called? A communications?
Contact specialist.
Contact specialist, thank you, yes. So that's briefly about Bashar. You can look him up at bashar.org. They used to have a fair number of videos on YouTube. There's a few more starting to creep in, but they tend to get taken down. So that's a little bit about Bashar. So yeah, Children of Infinity, that was great. And I made a couple of good friends. We were meeting regularly for several years. I think it actually started before COVID, a couple of years before COVID, yeah.
Yeah.
And And so there were local chapters around the country, and different people kind of were gravitating toward each other. And that was really a lovely thing that you did. And I find it interesting that you started, you felt your calling in 2011. In 2010 was when I felt like, okay, it's time to get going here. I felt the push from Spirit, time to graduate from being a student to being a teacher and sharing what I understand, which of course is always evolving. I don't think these understandings are ever static. They evolve as we do, although the underlying truths are consistent. So tell us about things since then. What's been evolving with Children of Infinity?
So I think the core things that I'm working on, one is, again, creating a spiritual foundation, which is aligned with science. And people can build on top of that. And that is majority of the work that we are doing. The second thing is building a community, because spiritual work can be very lonely at times, especially in our culture where it's rare to be really spiritually inspired. Most people are just busy with consumerism, where their entire life is spent on earning and spending, and they don't really think about the meaning of life. So I want to create a community. And then a couple of things that I have also done in there is in ancient India, there was this concept of ashrams. And the idea is that at different stages of your life, the understanding of spirituality is different, and you are supposed to do different things. So somebody who's 20 years old has a different path compared to somebody who's 60 years old. So life was divided in these 4 ashrams. So what I have done is we have created these different groups based on stages of life. And then we have monthly kind of community meetings where we talk about what's relevant to that particular stage. So for example, for young people, they are learning about relationships. That's a big part of the human journey, versus people who are much in the much later stages of life. For them, it's more about sharing what they have learned and kind of focusing on spiritual practice.
Very good. Yes. So we often have conversations here at the Consciousness Cafe about how to attract more young people. Do I detect from that perspective you just shared that perhaps the young people are just too occupied with other things, or should we continue to try to attract them?
Again, it's a problem of not having right models in front of them. And this is not a problem that can be solved quickly, but we need to work at it because ultimately all of us are seeking happiness. The way we go about it is different. And then for young people, since there are no role models, all they see is what everybody else is doing. And that's why they keep following what others are doing rather than really thinking deeply about their life.
Well, maybe that's a good place for us to start to talk about the 12 steps.
Sure.
Not to be confused with the 12 anonymous steps, the various anonymous programs. So here is the beautiful diagram that you created. I love rainbows, and this does a very nice job of presenting things. Tell us a little bit about this program and how you're going about this year of spiritual transformation.
Yes. So these steps came about 2 years ago is when we offered our first kind of a long-term program, which ran for a year. And then we looked into different practices and how to give. So my goal is to create a step-by-step process that anybody can follow and evolve spiritually. Now, the journey always begins with beliefs. So there's a lot of foundational work that needs to be done before you can go up and you can build on top of that. So in this diagram, the first 4 steps are kind of foundational, where you build the foundation based upon your beliefs. You get rid of things that don't serve you. You understand how, I'll go deeper into that, but I'm just giving first like the overall view. So the first 4 steps are about building the foundation. Then the next 2 steps, the 5th step is about the inner work, which is having a daily spiritual practice that gives you the inner strength and the inner channel. And then the 6th step is about the outer work. This is about living your life in a way that honors your individuality and the purpose for which you are here. And then the rest of it, from 7 to 12, are touching upon different aspects of human experience, how to manage your time, attention, and money, because that's our resources are what we have, and we need to learn how to use them properly. Then growth, pursuing joy, looking into relationships and health, and then going to giving. And then the last step is about rejuvenation. So that's the overall plan.
So I love that you start with upgrading core beliefs. I have long felt, since it was one of the first revelations I had, which is that our beliefs create our reality. Mm-hmm. And things become self-fulfilling prophecies. If we believe in something, then as Bashar points out, that's what you see. And the evidence that doesn't conform to that belief becomes invisible to us, and vice versa, if you change your beliefs. So I love that we have that wonderful creative power, and that you're starting with that as a foundation, because you really need a solid foundation. I consider that the foundation. And then detox, declutter, disconnect. Tell us a little more about that step.
Sure. So the biggest problem people have, as I said, people hold on to what does not serve them. This might be just stuff in their garage or in their living room. This might be emotional stuff that they have accumulated, maybe trauma that they have not healed. They might be unnecessarily consuming information. Too much information is actually detrimental. So all these sources of toxicity, and the big part of that is consumerism, which is this conditioned belief that all you need to do is buy more and more stuff. And people spend considerable amount of their mental energy in just staying up to date with gadgets and all that stuff. So, and it eats up into their mental energy. So this step is about first detoxing, which is removing the toxins which are already there in the system. Second is decluttering, to minimize what you have, and letting go of anything that does not serve you. And the last step is about disconnecting. Unless you disconnect from the sources of toxicity and clutter, it will keep on coming back.
Yeah, as far as disconnecting, I've really had to step back for at least the last 6 years or so from social media and the mainstream media and news. It seems totally designed to get us upset and agitated, and
yes. And that's how this information, the economy that we are in is an information economy. And the one resource they need to make the information economy running is attention.
Yeah.
And then this whole process of attention mining, which is Facebook is a perfect example, where they mine people's attention and sell it to advertisers. So that's the reality of where we are.
Yeah. And so then let's look at so I can tell you that by not watching the news and just reading headlines sporadically, a little bit here and there, I get more than enough. So what is Accelerate Spiritual Evolution about?
Sure. So this third step is about understanding that we are here in this reality to learn and grow. And that's the first step of accelerating our evolution. So there are models of evolution. One of them comes from the raw material, which talks about evolution of consciousness through densities. The other one comes from work by Dr. David Hawkins, who created this map of consciousness. So again, understanding this step is essential to see the path of what evolution even looks like. Most people are not even aware of what it means to be spiritually evolved.
Yeah. And so you're going to be doing one of these topics a month in the
yes.
year.
So the idea is that this program is a 1-year program, and we talk about each step every month. We just started in January. So we talked about upgrade core beliefs in that. So there were 2 lectures. And then in Feb, we are going to have 2 lectures on declutter and disconnect. So we have a lecture this coming Sunday on space and information detox. And then after 2 weeks, we have a lecture on emotions and relationship detox.
Wonderful. And then tell us about channel higher energies.
Yes, so this goes more into pre-birth planning. So the idea is that all of us are channels of energies. As I said before, there is only one energy that is there. We can either manifest higher energies of peace, harmony, and joy, or we can manifest lower energies of fear, victimhood, and conflict. So this goes into the basics of pre-birth planning and how to have a good partnership with the universe.
Very good. And then cultivating spiritual practice, things like meditation.
Yes. Meditation, study, and contemplation, the 3 core practices. And then we also go into what's the suggested routine, what are the things like what are the foods that are suggested for a good spiritual growth, and preparation of space and things like that. So the nitty-gritty of setting a daily spiritual practice.
Now, you mentioned food, and that's always a sensitive subject. And it creates a lot of anxiety and I believe guilt in a lot of people. You know, one of the things that always makes me roll my eyes is when there's a new publication from somebody saying, this is good for you, or this is bad for you. And I immediately think, okay, here comes the mainstream media putting new ideas into our heads. And it's frequently within 10 years, they reverse that perspective.
Yes.
And in the meantime, we sit here and we like X, whatever X might be. And then they tell us it's bad for us. Like, let's say butter. Butter was bad for you because of cholesterol, and you feel guilty about butter. And so then you switch to margarine, and you think you're being good and taking margarine instead of butter. And then they come along and they tell us, oops, no, margarine is saturated fat. That's bad for you. And butter is better for you.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
what do you teach people about the guilt that comes with all of those shoulds and shouldn'ts?
Again, this has to be understood. There's a problem. People focus on perfection rather than progress. What I mean by that is, if there is somebody who's smoking 10 cigarettes a day, and he cuts it down to 1 cigarette a day, that's 90% progress.
Yeah.
Now, instead of focusing on progress, if you focus on perfection, you would say, I'm a failure because I could not quit smoking. But that's not the case. There's a lot of progress. So again, when it comes to food and food habits, again, the basics, we start. So in yoga, food is building block of the body, but it's also energy that works to build the inner body. And that inner body can either be helpful or it can hinder our spiritual evolution. So again, natural food as much as we can, and avoiding processed food, because what they do is, in the processing, all these chemicals are added which act as toxins and they cause problems. I also go into one big question that people have is about meat versus not meat. From my perspective, I go into the science, and there's a great documentary on Netflix. It's called The Game Changers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if people have watched it. So I tell them, go watch the movie and make a decision after that. I'm not going to tell you what you should or should not do.
I also think it partly comes down to what our internal beliefs are. And if we really still believe that you need meat, then cutting it out can actually ultimately be detrimental because you're going against your internal beliefs.
Yes. Yeah, so again, changing beliefs is not an easy process. But again, by looking at information, by looking at research, and then experimenting with what we have, that's the way to go forward. And what I teach is not all meat is the same. The way it's been taught in yoga is the more evolved the animal is, the more harmful it becomes to your system. Because it's like the evolution process itself is the more evolved the animal is, it's closer to being a human being. And that's why energetically, it's hard to integrate that energy into your system. So from that perspective, if you just cut out eating mammals and only eat chicken or even the lowest one is fish, there you still reduce a lot of toxicity in the process. And again,
Gotcha.
it's a process. It's not that you quit everything today. Make step-by-step process changes, and then over a period of time, you can see the progress.
Yeah, I have a friend who he has a phrase that I really love. He says, "I'm a vegetarian who occasionally eats meat." So, a la your progress versus perfection, I think that's a really good step forward. So what else do you think is critical? Because when we have a certain belief, we don't always know how deeply ingrained it is. And we can say, okay, yes, that is bad. And we turn away from something that we may have a strong attachment to. And then we're fighting against our inner nature and our beliefs, and there's all sorts of conflict. What's your advice to people who are experiencing that kind of conflict?
So the process starts with exposing yourself to information that goes against your beliefs. Because the way beliefs are acquired, we are not born with them. There's a long period of conditioning because of which we have acquired whatever beliefs we have about food or anything. And the process of changing those beliefs is, again, not an overnight process. It's a process where you begin to examine counter beliefs. And then over a period of time, they become your primary beliefs.
Very good. Yeah, I like one of the sayings of Abraham, which is, if you believe something's good for you and it's not, it's better for you than something that's good for you that you believe is not good for you, if you get that logic. So belief really trumps everything else to some degree. And it takes a while too. I've found that if you eat a steady diet of whatever, let's say it's, I don't want to ruin a food choice for somebody, but let's say it's something that you've been eating for a long time. Your body gets used to it.
Yes,
it accommodates.
That's also true.
It understands how to work with it, so it adjusts to that energy profile. And so making dramatic changes can be difficult from that perspective too.
Yes.
Okay. So what else are some of the critical, fundamental items that you teach?
So I think the belief part, the very first step is understanding ourselves as portion of source energy. I think that's a critical step in this process. It's like when we started this scientific revolution, there was one core belief. And it was not even about whether the earth goes around the sun or the vice versa. It was about what creates truth. And at that time, it was widely believed that there is a book, and that book is the source of truth. And when Galileo countered that belief, because of that one small change, we have the scientific revolution, and everything that we see in terms of technology came out of that one small adjustment.
So to be clear, the book you're referring to is?
Bible.
Yes. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I want to make that clear to our audience that that was what you're referring to. Go ahead.
So now the problem is we have changed our beliefs about material reality. We have gone from this believing in a book to doing experiments and seeing how experiments work, and based on the experiments we create a theory. Something similar needs to happen in the spiritual domain, which has not happened. So spirituality is the only domain in which we still carry ideas which are thousands of years old. If you look at everything else, if you look at medicine, how we train for sports, our ideas have changed a lot. And today, if you go to a doctor who has an old book, which is like 20 years old, that would be out of touch with what is being practiced today. But at the same time, we have people who believe in these thousands of year old ideas, and they are so adamant about why these ideas are correct.
It's amazing how, as humans, we love to latch on to simple things. It's like, okay, if I belong to this group and I say that I agree with this philosophy, then that's easy. Then I can just live my life and everything's fine. We so often give our power up to authority figures, organizations, books, teachers. How do you feel about authority figures?
So there is a step of evolution where it's just like being a child. When we are young, we believe whatever our parents tell us, whether it's Santa Claus or everything, right? But there's a point at which we grow up and we begin to see that the world that we see from our own eyes, that picture is more important than what we have been taught. And the same is true for spiritual beliefs, where you might have spent years in a church or whatever, but after a while, you get to a point where you begin to see, okay, my truth is something different.
Right. Right. So I'm with you. I was brought up Catholic, and at a certain point, I became what I call a spiritual independent, because I got to the ceiling, and it was like, I can't get any further with this belief system. It's not making sense. Let me try some other things out. What spiritual traditions were you brought up with, Dr. K?
So I was brought up in Hinduism. But Hinduism is it's not the same as what you understand about modern religion, which is only like 2000 years old. It doesn't have one book or one teaching. Because it is based in yoga, which was, again, your own path. So there are different ways to be Hindu. You can believe in God. You can believe in God that's manifest. You can believe in God that's unmanifest. And it's a whole philosophical work. But I was not very religious. I was more scientific.
So, yeah, for me, I've always had a spiritual bent, however. I assume you felt that way too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what's led to my path of discovery. But I don't try to convince people who are somewhere else on the journey that they should be where I am. Just like I don't want to be convinced by somebody that I should be where they are.
Right.
There's the golden rule, the good old golden rule. Tell us what your conception of the divine, the creator, God, whatever.
So my conception is more of a quantum mechanical side, whereas there is a source of energy and it's intelligent energy. I gave an example of electricity. So when you see a movie show, what is real in that show? And the only thing that's real is the electricity, which gives you the illusion of picture and sound and makes the whole movie work.
Right.
So that source of energy is what I call source. And we are all portions of that energy. That's the critical thing to understand, because there is nothing outside of the source. Everything that's created comes from the source, which means we also come from the source. And then it's all about just realizing our oneness. And when we realize our oneness with source, we also realize our oneness with all of life.
Yeah, science is coming around to this as well, slowly but surely. And quantum mechanics is at the core of it, it seems. In fact, there's a new book out recently by Heinrich Paz, P-A-S, called The One, where he goes into how physics and quantum mechanics and a lot of the things that have been understood there can support the concept of what he calls monism, that is, all is one. That book just came out. So if anybody in the audience or who's watching this later on YouTube is interested in physics, you might want to check that one out. It's getting some good reviews. All right, well, let's see if we've got any questions here. Or if anybody wants to raise their hand, use the raise hand function, you can ask questions directly. And
so one more thing I have here is, if there are people interested, this course that is being run, it's free. You can go to this website, which is our community platform. And again, it's free to join. This has the whole course and the videos and assignments listed there, where you can watch all the videos, do the assignments on your own. And there's a community if you want to ask questions. Let me just post the link here.
And don't be shy with your questions, because Dr. K is very good at answering the tough questions. Or did Mark suggest, did we want to finish the 12 steps? I think I was getting the
Yes,
feeling.
so I think we went till internal practice, which was step 5.
All right, you want to talk a little more then?
Yes, so once we have the daily spiritual practice, I said that's the inner work of raising your consciousness. There is an outer work, which is step 6, which is to align with your soul purpose. So all of us came here with our own unique gifts. And the point of being here is to cultivate those gifts. And that only happens when you align with your true purpose rather than what is socially conditioned. So we go into that in step 6.
Now, let me stop you there. That's a deep one. How do you figure out your purpose?
So if you look at your life experiences, these are markers that have been along your path. So for example, some people have experienced healing in their life, and after they have healed, they are in a position to guide others who are seeking the same healing.
Yes. Yeah, I think you may be thinking of the book by Schwartz. I think it's Robert Schwartz, on your soul's purpose and your soul's plan. Those are 2 great books.
Yeah.
Okay. And step 7.
So 7 is where kind of the rubber meets the road, because we can talk about spirituality all day long, but if we don't use our resources properly, then it's all just a talk. It will not get us there. So looking at our primary resources, which is time, attention, and money, and using them in a way that they are investments in our spiritual progress. That's the subject of this lesson.
Which is what we're all doing here now. You're watching this video because you're investing your time in your spiritual progress. How about step 8?
So step 8 is about growing and taking risks. So when we came here, we have this partnership with the universe where we decided to do something before coming here. The problem is most people get stuck at one point, and they tend to stay within a comfort zone rather than grow. So this is about inviting growth in our life. And a part of that is also taking risks.
So there's that teaching that growth begins edge of your comfort zone, right?
Right, right.
And then pursuing joy.
9 is about pursuing joy. So many people have very mixed feelings about what joy is, first of all, because we often confuse joy with happiness and pleasure. In my opinion, pleasure is of the body, happiness is of the psyche, and joy is of the spirit.
Mm.
So these are three different things at different levels of our evolution. But this step is more about, first of all, identifying your joy. And the second is about giving yourself the permission and the tools to pursue the joy and not see joy as a luxury. Joy is a critical kind of resource on the human journey.
What are the main things that prevent us from experiencing happiness and joy, in your opinion?
So most of it is conditioning, in my opinion, where we have been taught that this is the way to go, get an education, get a job, do this, do that. And we never really think about, where am I going? Why am I going there?
Yeah. And we're always taught that to pursue something and that the achievement will give us that happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's about finding a way to be happy with what you have today.
Exactly.
That enables you to be even happier tomorrow because you understand the attitude of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Or joyousness. So then relationships and health. Tell us about
Yes, so
that.
this is where in the health section, we go into nutrition, exercise, sleep, all the basics of health. And then we also, in the relationships, we go on seeing relationships through the lens of your higher self rather than ego. And again, also seeing relationships as a joyous co-creation rather than putting the burden of your happiness on the other person, which is an impossible burden to carry.
Now, you brought up the word ego. The teachings that resonate with me say basically that ego is like a tool. Mm-hmm. It's like the clothes that we wear to exist in human form, but we get too identified with it. Mm-hmm. And just like you would not say, well, I'm this shirt or this pair of pants or these shoes, it's just something that helps you exist in this reality, really. Mm-hmm. And we put too much power to the ego instead of understanding that we are the awareness behind it all.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And then giving, my goodness, service to others, right?
Yes. I believe that's our highest calling on the human journey, which is to cultivate our gifts and then give those gifts to others so they can add to the beauty of the creation.
Often I'll find somebody, I'll be advising or coaching somebody, and one of the advices that I will give is find a way to give back, find a way to serve, to volunteer, to do something in the world, or even, find a job that puts you more out front where you can feel like you're contributing to humanity in some way. Anything like that can help get you out of that me mindset where you're all worried about all these things, and it kind of breaks that log jam.
Right.
And
then the last step is about just celebrating the human journey, because we are so caught up in judgment that we are just thinking about, okay, I did not do this, I did not do that. And we constantly tend to focus on what we did not do and did not accomplish rather than what we did.
Yes, that's really, really good advice. I call it count your blessings, right? Mm-hmm. That too. Count the things that are working. The glass is always halfway. I'm just glad there's a glass. All right, let's see what we've got in the chat here. And if anybody wants to raise their hand, you can ask directly. Okay, we have a question from Mark. Does this model contain learning how to control emotions in the ego, and then what to do if you successfully eliminate them, leaving you thinking that life without desire emotions is not work living? That doesn't quite make sense, Mark. Is not work living. Oh, is not worth living. I think that was what he meant. So being too detached.
So again, this is, in my opinion, it's a misconception that you should be detached from the world. And again, it arises because of this duality where we separate the physical from the spiritual. And we think that our goal is to transcend the physical and become spiritual, which is not why we came here. So in my opinion, we came here to understand the physical as spiritual.
Yes.
So, and with that foundation, if we start there, we understand that everything is here to serve us. All we have to do is to make use of what's in front of us.
Find the right relationship to life and things. All right. Jim has his hand up. I'm going to add Jim here. What have you got for us, Jim?
I wonder if there's an unspoken thing that we just kind of assume we all know. And that is, if we go through all the spiritual process, what is the end benefit? You know, I think most of us probably have a good idea what the answer is, but we do this for a reason. What is the reason?
The reason is, so in classical spirituality is called enlightenment, which is being able to experience the highest state of joy right here, right now.
So is there no benefit when we move into a non-physical at the end of this life?
The benefit, so if you think in terms of growth, the benefit is you will graduate and not come back to the school.
All right, so that's kind of what I'm getting at. I think there's something more. If this life is a temporary experience, things that we do that enhance the quality of this life, when it's over, it's got to have some kind of carryover benefit. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes. So reincarnation is the key here. And from reincarnational perspective, each of our lives is one chapter in our learning, which has the end goal of just moving towards perfection. Just like mastering relationships, it takes people years and years, and even then they can't seem to figure it out. And then they have to continue it in the next life, and then eventually they reach a goal where they are able to honor a relationship while honoring themselves and others. And then that's just one thing. Similarly, there is money, there is contribution, there are lots of things to be learned about being human.
Yeah, I think it carries over, we continue learning on the other side, don't we? We continue developing. It's not like this is the only place that we can gain valuable experience.
Yes.
But I believe, from what I've read, that learning on the other side is a slower process. Here, it's like we're lifting very heavy weights. We're building strong spiritual muscles.
Yeah, so I'll not go into, there are, again, the other side itself is not a single stage of evolution. There are, according to raw material, there are 7 stages of evolution. And once we learn from the physical experience, the next sets of incarnation happen in a body that's not even chemical. So just like we learn and we grow, and then we have a new school, just like we go from undergrad to grad school, and then we go to postdoc and all that. So the learning itself changes.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jim?
Well, I can come up with lots of questions, but let's give other people a chance.
Well, so far, I don't see anything else. So healing is something we've been talking about a fair amount lately, is the power of intention, sometimes called prayer, and intentional manifesting. And especially interesting to me is doing so in the area of healing.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a bit about intention and prayer. And then
so from my
healing.
perspective, the biggest issue or the biggest key to healing is forgiveness. Forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. And the root is realizing that there is nothing to forgive. Once people reach that point that we are all in this dance together, and from the limited perspective, it might look like something that needs to be forgiven. Really, there is nothing to be forgiven.
That's a hard one to learn when you've experienced a difficult life. Not that I have had a particularly difficult life, but I very much empathize with people who have. But that's beautiful. Some of those people who've had very challenging experiences, they can come to that feeling of forgiveness. That's really a marvelous thing when it happens. Oh, we got some more messages. Let's see what we've got here. All right. This is from Elizabeth. How do you help people learn how to honor their time, attention, and money?
That's a big question. So I think the journey starts by valuing yourself, that just wasting your time and money is not okay. And most people have never even been taught that. They are just acting like cogs in this machinery of consumerism, where all of their time is spent on consumption. But once we have a higher purpose, that's when we start to really think about, why am I here? What am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And then it's just a process of figuring things out iteratively for most people, where they cut out the easy low-hanging fruit, which is watching TV and social media and all these things, which gives them more time to think about their life, to meditate, read, and all that. So it's a snowball where you start with just maybe cutting out 30 minutes from TV and investing in a book. And then over a period of time, you change from within, and your external way of living life also changes.
All right, we've got a question. Have you ever encountered theosophy? Has it had any influence on your beliefs?
I have read theosophy. Again, so the problem I see, not a problem, or it did not align exactly with the scientific perspective. And there are lots of theological kind of philosophies. The problem again is these are old ideas which have been there. And then the question is, again, how do we validate them? And the problem with most of these philosophies is they don't provide a way to validate what they are teaching. So it's better to sometimes just start from scratch and start from the very simple principles and go from there.
How do you feel about pragmatism? That, if a belief, even if it's wrong, helps you live a better life, that it's worthwhile?
So in the journey of evolution, we have to really see beliefs as tools, and we have to strive for better tools. Now, just because something is, so for example, all of this industrial waste that we have created came out of this belief that we can just use Earth resources. And the problem is you don't see the consequences in 1 year or 1 decade. right? The consequences show up in half a century or a century. But if you keep doing what was being done, then you'll destroy the planet. So it's always challenging to think about your beliefs, but that is what we need to do as conscious human beings.
So observe, think about it, and we're working on being better as opposed to perfect. Now, another question. Does your model discuss doing things in moderation, or what some call the golden mean, the middle path, the middle way?
The problem, it's theoretically, yes, we should do things in moderation. But what that moderation is a very kind of hazy line where what is moderation? There are extremes that we know, and it's always good to avoid extremes because that will damage the system. So I agree with you. We need to be mindful of the resources, including our bodies and our resources. But again, what it means, it changes from individual to individual, and it also changes as we evolve. It's like running a marathon. If a person who has never run a marathon runs for that long, they are going to experience so much pain versus somebody who has been doing this for years.
Now, tell us what your thinking is about divine guidance and synchronicities, and when things, you think about something and then it pops into your experience. What do you think is going on there?
So when we come into this reality, there's a part of us which is staying in the background and trying to guide us, which is called the higher self. Now, the higher self can only guide you in very subtle ways. Otherwise, it will overwhelm your free will. And then the physical journey will not make any sense. So that's why this information trickles in as inspiration.
Right. He was like 19 days.
And it's very easy to ignore that inspiration because you think, okay, this is just some crazy idea that I have got. But if you do act on that inspiration, it will open the doors that the universe had planned for you.
Can't disagree with that. All right. Well, are there any other points you'd like to make? And this will be a last call for questions, I guess. Feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand, everybody. Dr. K, any final points?
Yes, the final thing I just want to say is that on the spiritual journey, at least in the beginner stages, there's this great pitfall of being an information consumer. And that I see a lot in people where they keep jumping from information to information. They watch hundreds of videos on YouTube, and all of this information, which is unprocessed, doesn't really help. It actually hinders people because it leads to confusion. So my advice would be to not focus on knowledge as such, but focus on practices, something that you can do every day, because the core of spiritual progress is in practices that you can do every day, and slowly, step by step, they take you towards the goal.
So balance between the intellectual and the physical. Focus on experiences as well as knowledge. Well, this has been wonderful, Dr. K. We really appreciate you coming on. And I confess, if you didn't notice already, everybody, that I'm a big fan. And I'm going to follow the 12 steps to spiritual transformation this year. And it's the next step, the next 12 steps on my journey. As they say, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? Or maybe 12. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you.
God bless. And we appreciate this very much.